And on behalf of my co-president, Mike Dubinsky, OAM, the Melbourne Holocaust Museum Board, the Melbourne Holocaust Museum Foundation, our CEO, Dr. Breanne Fallon, and our staff, I am delighted to welcome you to this evening's event. Can you please turn your phones to silent? I begin by acknowledging the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I would also like to acknowledge the elders in our community, the Holocaust survivors whose dedication and foresight are the inspiration behind our beautiful museum. And it is so wonderful to see you, Paul, and Rona and Henry here tonight. Thank you. In this museum, the largest institution in Australia, solely dedicated to Holocaust education, research and remembrance, we promise the survivors to amplify their voices and honour our commitment of Zachor, to remember. I'd like to mention Terry and John O'Lazarus and her parents Judy and Leon Goldman, in whose names our Learning Centre is dedicated. Additionally, our annual Rosenkranz Oration is named in honour and memory of Terry's grandparents, Shmuel and Betty Rosenkranz, and is generously enabled by the MHM Foundation. Helen Maimoff, OAM, is the chair of our foundation. This foundation is independently and responsibly governed by its Board of Trustees, and this endowment holds a substantial corpus and provides the museum with financial sustainability and stability through its annual distribution. Thank you, Helen and the trustees. I would like to welcome the Honorary Consul for Germany, Michael Pearce. And so I'll just talk a bit about the Rosenkranz Oration and then introduce what we're doing this evening. So this oration was created in 2008 in memory of Betty Rosenkranz and to honour the legacy of Shmuel Rosenkranz as the second president of the museum. Shmuel was a tireless worker for the centre and many other communal organisations. As an eyewitness to Kristallnacht, Shmuel came to Australia deeply committed to Holocaust remembrance and education. And Kristallnacht is often referred to in English as the Night of Broken Glass, a violent pogrom which took place on November 9 and 10, 1938, throughout Germany, which then included Austria and the Sudeten region of Czechoslovakia. During Kristallnacht, Nazis burned more than 1,400 synagogues, vandalised thousands of Jewish-owned businesses, broke into Jewish people's apartments and homes, and desecrated Jewish religious objects. They also humiliated, assaulted, and killed Jewish people. And as part of Kristallnacht, the German police imprisoned about 26,000 Jewish men in concentration camps, just because they were Jewish. The events that took place on the Night of Broken Glass 87 years ago marked a turning point in the history of the Holocaust, and we are deeply aware of the echoes and reverberations of history. Over the last 2 years, the growth of anti-Semitism in our country and across the globe has been overwhelming. In these intense and challenging times, our work is more vital and relevant than ever. I am pleased to say that more and more Victorian students are coming to our museum. This year, we will have educated close to 30,000 students. And our aim is to keep increasing this number and continue educating Australian students in 3 ways: by transforming understanding through personal connections, which fosters deep empathy and respect; by inspiring the next generation of witnesses, enabling students to become the witnesses to the witness, thereby carrying forward the responsibility to remember; and by encouraging ongoing dialogue and change, by sparking meaningful conversations that extend beyond the visit. Because we know from research, ultimately coming here ultimately shapes a more compassionate and informed society. There is a Jewish teaching that says, in the midst of life, remember death. In the midst of death, remember life. These words have guided generations through times of pain and hope. And last month, as we watched images of kidnapped Israeli hostages returning home, those words felt more powerful than ever. For 2 long years, the hostages were held captive, tortured, isolated, and haunted by the presence of death. Yet somehow, even in the darkest moments, they clung to the faintest thread of life, and miraculously, they emerged from the shadows of death. To see them reunited with their loved ones, parents embracing their children, siblings finding one another again, and to hear a gifted pianist touch piano keys for the first time in 2 years are moments that will forever echo in the hearts and minds of Jews around the world. But for Holocaust survivors, these scenes carry a special and sacred poignancy because they know what it means to lose everything and how miraculous it is to be found again. And I spoke to Buchenwald Holocaust survivor Joe Schwartzberg, who watched the reunions with tears filling his eyes. He remembered the day he found his sisters after the war, a day he never thought would come. I didn't know if they were alive, and when I saw them, it was the happiest day of my life. And today, I am so happy the hostages are back with their families. So tonight you are in for a very special evening, starting with an oration from our keynote speaker, Simon Tedeschi, followed by a live performance of Sarenka by Elena Kats-Chernin on piano, accompanying cellist Rachel Tobin and violinist Dal Baltrop. Sarenka was presented by the MSO and was written in honour of Sarah Weiss, Bob Weiss's mother. And Bob, I'd like to welcome you to the Holocaust Museum. Thank you very much for coming. So Simon, to tell you a little bit about Simon Tedeschi, at just 9 years old, Simon made his debut as a pianist at the Sydney Opera House. Since then, Simon has gone on to perform at Carnegie Hall and with major orchestras across the United States and Australia. Today, Simon stands among Australia's leading classical pianists, celebrated for his performances throughout Europe, North America, Asia, and of course, here in Australia. He's even played for world leaders, including President George W. Bush and the Dalai Lama. Simon's artistry has earned him some of the nation's highest honours, including Symphony Australia's Young Performer of the Year, the Calibre Prize for his essay, This Woman, My Grandmother, and the Centenary of Federation Medal. But Simon's talents don't end at the piano. As you heard, he's a published author. His debut book, Fugitive, was shortlisted for several prestigious literary awards. His writing has appeared in Sydney Morning Herald, Caesar Magazine, and the SBS Feast. So, Simon, I look forward to hearing your oration tonight about the power of music. Thank you.
A young Jewish law student sits in a lecture hall in Bucharest. His ribs are still sore from the blows he took that morning. He opens his notebook and writes, 2 punches during today's lecture, 8 pages of notes, good value for 2 punches. That student was Mikhail Sebastian, and those sentences, written 80 years ago, tell us more about Jewish endurance than any monument ever could. They remind us that dignity can survive when safety does not, that meaning can persist when power is gone. To say it is an honour to be here at the Holocaust Museum feels like the wrong phrase, especially at a time like this, because what words can one use when asked to speak before, on behalf of, and as witness to the Kehillah, the community to which he belongs, facing the greatest challenges to Jewish life in 80 years. What possible hope can a man of 44 have, a man raised in relative safety and comfort, when addressing a people whose memory is bound to the greatest Hurban, the greatest destruction in human history? For this is Melbourne, a city built by survivors and their children, who came here seeking safety and surety, perhaps more than anywhere else on earth. And how can an artist speak about art in a world where people are dying, alliances collapsing, families fracturing, and old hatreds returning. At times it feels almost indecent to speak of beauty at all. The German Jewish philosopher Theodor Adorno famously said that to write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric. That line has been repeated so often it's become a kind of cliché of despair, a symptom of the very illness it describes. Yet, what Adorno meant, I think, was simpler and harsher, that to be merely poetic, which is decorative or beautiful or innocent, is no longer possible. When the Holocaust occurred, a crime so total it broke language itself, meaning had to change. Beauty, nobility, honour, tenderness, all were compromised. After all, the Nazis were not savages, they were educated Europeans. They loved Goethe, Hölderlin and Schubert. They painted, they wrote, they sang hymns, and then they went to work in the camps where millions languished, including my own extended family. The Viennese Jewish writer Stefan Zweig saw this rupture clearly when he wrote of his parents, and I quote, "They were prosperous people who grew rich, then even very rich, and wealth comfortably draft-proofed your windows and walls in those times. Their way of life seems to me typical of the Jewish middle classes that had made significant contributions to Viennese culture, only to be exterminated root and branch by way of thanks." No artist captures this hefsek, this break in meaning, more than Paul Celan. Born Paul Ancel in Bukovina, Romania, Celan began as a symbolist poet. After the war, after his mother's murder in Auschwitz and his own internment in a labour camp, he faced the unanswerable question, how can a Jewish poet, bearing witness to the incommensurable, ever write again? Celan did the most Jewish thing you can imagine. He took the language he loved, which was his mother tongue, German, and transfigured it. Translation itself became expression. In Atemwende, or breath turn, his poems are acts of linguistic tikkun, repair. Each word is a nitzotz, a divine spark torn from its vessel. Poetry for Celan was no longer song, but survival, the stammer of a man speaking through smoke. Let me be clear, nothing was redeemed by the Shoah. Art was not improved, humanity really learned no lesson. The hunger for power and purity still lives in the world. But nevertheless, something endured. The act of silent communion, devekut, the clinging of the soul to what little light remains. After those 6 years, art became whisper, breath, broken song. It ceased to speak and began to stammer. It learned to bear the sight of blood. It became what prayer once was, not a bridge to a powerful God, but a fragile means of surviving existence itself. And even now, in a world of hashtags and slogans, tribalism and tawdriness, this remains our greatest Jewish act of resistance. Let the world shout, we will whisper. Let hatred bray, we will build meaning. Let conspiracies multiply, we will keep writing broken poetry and mending stolen songs. We must risk depth in a shallow age and even tolerate being misunderstood. This, for me, is what it means to be an artist, and especially a Jewish artist, after the Shoah. Art matters because it resists utility. It is lishma, for its own sake. That is its morality. We are Am HaSefer, the people of the book, and the word is our source. Music, poetry, painting, these are how we speak into tohu, the void from which divine light, scattered into sparks, awaits repair. I am not frum whatsoever, nor a believer in any conventional sense. I am really a lazy observer of the prayers that shaped my family for centuries, born of ancestors like the Baal Shem Tov. But yet it is in this post-religious world that I feel myself returning to their impulse, if not their creed, to that same midrashic urge to wrest meaning from silence. What the world lacks is Kodesh, the sacred. Not religion, but ritual, the shared patterns built into our nervous system. When the sacred collapses, ideology rushes in. Deprived of belonging, we invent counterfeit religions, purity rituals of inclusion and exclusion, ideology as identity, trauma as badge. Performance replaces conviction. Moral theatre replaces moral courage. Words are cheapened, drained, returned to the tehom, the abyss from which they came. But we, the people of the word, endure. After thousands of years of decrees, pogroms, and exiles, we carry the book, the manuscript, the song. We are both of the land and beyond it. We speak almost every language on earth, yet share a glance, a shrug, a joke that says everything. We sing a song, we light a ner, we pour wine for Eliyahu, and when hatred comes, we smile. Our bodies may be brittle, but our neshama, our soul, is unbreakable. That is why the Jew is hated in every generation, because the Jew remains intact in a broken world. We cannot be neatly classified. We are nation, we are people, we are religion, we are culture, we are argument and melody. We come in many colours, we exist in contradiction, and that contradiction is our strength. This is necessary, but also threatening to a world poised on a precipice. For the old is falling away and something new must come. Art, whether music, poetry, or painting, is how we cradle what comes next without pretending to control it. And so, there is, even in a world like this one, I believe, reason to celebrate, even amidst confusion and pain. I am suddenly reminded of that terrible film, The Devil Wears Prada. Anne Hathaway, the plain Jane as it were, walks in wearing a drab jumper, and Meryl Streep dismantles her illusion of individuality. She traces that sweater's lineage from Oscar de la Renta to Yves Saint Laurent to the clearance bin. Even our clichés have a lineage. The slogans of social media activism, the moral theatrics that mistake visibility for virtue, they borrow their cadences from Jewish voices who once fought for dignity not only for Jews but for all humanity. Their rhythm, their moral pitch, their justice, redemption and repair are ours. Thinkers like Walter Benjamin and Martin Buber began those conversations. Jewish humanists who valued experience over ideology, relationship over system, meaning over mechanism. The artist's role then is like that, I believe, of an ancient shepherd, gathering what strays, not to possess it, but to guide it, to return, not nostalgically, but essentially. As Jews, we can be custodians of a culture open to renewal and rebirth. We can defy the algorithm and the cheap assignation. With our immense legacy comes immense responsibility to ensure it is neither defaced nor diminished. We are Or Lagoyim, a light unto the nations, custodians of Tikkun Olam, heralds of a world where all people, Jew and non-Jew, man and woman, gay and straight, black and white, are once more rendered luminous, each a vessel for the same scattered light. That's why I began with Mihail Sebastian. His notebook became his world, a record not just of what he studied, but how he endured. He listened to his friends debate communism and Zionism, right and wrong, hope and despair, just like today. And faced with hatred, instead of shouting, he wrote, quietly and with dignity. In those pages, he carved out a small, stubborn space of freedom, a place where thought could survive when everything else conspired to beat it out of him. Others have done this too, across many cultures and epochs, but I like to think that this Jewish mode of resistance, through art, through scrutiny, through the joke, uttered in the wilderness, is our particular gift to humanity. A seed scattered through the forest, carried on ships, translated, reborn. If Jews have been the carriers of the artistic breath, then this must be more than inheritance. I believe it must also be responsibility. Judaism, if it is to renew itself again, as it did after Babylon, as it did after Rome, as it did after the Shoah, must resist the seductions of the algorithm and the outrage cycle. In the face of the dilution of ideas and the inflation of noise, we must move in the opposite direction, away from performance and towards depth, away from certainty and towards nuance, away from rage bait and towards global citizenship, even in the face of hatred. I was actually asked to speak tonight about keeping memory alive, the power of music. My conviction is that the Jew must do this by counteracting the age itself. Let us write essays instead of status updates. Let us compose poetry instead of purity tests. Let us play Gershwin instead of declaring in-groups and out-groups. Let us tell jokes when the humorless hate us. Let us remember that the best resistance is to reflect hatred back on itself, and that there is no greater way to do this than with art. Once again, I am drawn to Mihail Sebastian, birth name Josef Hechter, one of the 20th century's most criminally underrated authors. The great Romanian philosopher Ionescu agreed to write the preface to Sebastian's second novel, For 2,000 Years, a work shaped by Sebastian's experience as a Romanian Jew. 20 years older than Sebastian, Ionescu was the editor of the ultra-nationalist daily The Word, which later became the official mouthpiece of the Iron Guard and counted Eliade, Sioran and Sebastian himself among its contributors. His preface, however, turned out to be a scathing denunciation of both author and book, and I quote, "It is an assimilationist illusion, the illusion of so many Jews who sincerely believe they are Romanian. Are you Josef Hechter, a human being from Braila on the Danube? No. You are a Jew from Braila on the Danube. You are a Jew." But here is the crucial part of the story. Confronted with this betrayal from a supposed friend, Sebastian chose not to fight back or confront Ionescu. Rather, he published the novel exactly as it stood, including Ionescu's unedited preface, which enraged him. I try, in my own way, to channel Sebastian's inner strength, especially in the light of the last few years when I too was subjected to the oldest hatred in the world. Few people know this, but I never had a bar mitzvah. I refused, partly out of rebellion, partly out of arrogance. I wasn't interested in shul. I thought myself too modern, too clever. But now, looking back, I see those refusals somewhat differently, as inchoate expressions of Jewish resistance. The refusal to conform simply because conformity was expected. And yet, as I grow older, and as the ghosts of my grandparents hover beside me, washing the dishes, scolding me for the wrong bus, for being late again, or for not wearing slacks like Ridge from Bold and the Beautiful, I realise I have, in my own way, become more Jewish than ever. Not observant, not righteous, just present to inheritance. I no longer try to be the good Jew. I don't laugh along at jokes that cut too close, or nod politely when Jewish identity is reduced to a punchline. It's not from pride, but from responsibility. My writing and music are steeped in Judaism. To create is to distill human experience so that it can be reflected back to itself. And who has done that better than our poets and prophets, our storytellers and sages who turned suffering into meaning? Jeremiah and Miriam, Hillel and Akiva, Hannah Arendt and Walter Benjamin, Emmanuel Levinas, all of these people showed that to think is to care, and that interpretation can be an act of mercy, that meaning can be drawn even from ashes. And they remind me of something else, that the Jew is not a moral archetype, but a human being. What matters is not so much being better, but being truer to the inheritance of questioning, of study, of wrestling with meaning. Jewish life has never been about moral superiority. It has been about moral attention, staying awake in the long night of history. And that vigilance has not been ours alone. I think of William Cooper, the Yorta Yorta elder, who led a march to the German consulate in Melbourne in 1938 to protest the persecution of Jews. His act of solidarity, the only known private protest against Kristallnacht anywhere in the world, reminds us that moral attention crosses nations, faiths, and histories. It is a light handed from one people's suffering to another's conscience. I often recall the line, "The Jew is like any other being, any other human being, only more so." Thinkers like Arendt, Buber, Benjamin, different as they were, understood that the Jew, though endlessly cast as other, is in fact the West's disavowed conscience, the recurring outsider who thrives precisely in moments of liberal democracy, artistic fecundity, and tolerance, yet remains restless even when things are good. Anti-Semitism, then, is not just prejudice. It is a metaphysical toxin, a flaw woven into the fabric of Western thought. That is why it mutates endlessly and why it cannot be eradicated by reason alone. It lives between words, just like art does, but where art deepens, anti-Semitism diminishes. The Jew becomes the scapegoat of every stupidity, cast by both extremes as the schemer, the upraider of values, and yet the maker of music, philosophy, theatre, and poetry that the anti-Semite still happily consumes with pleasure. The Jew who, despite ridicule, calumny, collective blame, and clickbaiting, keeps trying stubbornly and absurdly to make the world a little better. That is what it means for me to be a Jewish artist in 2025. To be imperfect but enduring, humble to history, a steward of time and tradition, aware that, as Rabbi Soloveitchik said, chaos lives in each of us, and it is our duty to hold it at bay. This philosophy of life, this Yiddishkeit of being, touches everything I do. When I open a book, begin an essay, or sit at the piano, I face not certainty but invitation, a jumble of ink, or worse, a field of white space waiting to be named. To write, to play, to think, all of it is a form of midrash, a reaching beyond the surface. Meaning, as the American poet Emerson saw and our sages knew, is not fixed but concentric. It's an expanding circle without end. But this is not postmodern nihilism. It is acceptance that the final meaning will never be reached. It is humility. As the Torah teaches, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo ata ben chorin lehibatel mimena. Forgive my pronunciation. It is not upon you to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. To be Jewish is to keep working, to wrestle with God or with silence or the blank page, even when we do not know if anyone is listening. To be Jewish is to accept that one is a legatee of history, including the catastrophe of history, a catastrophe that did not begin or end with the Shoah, but continues each and every day. To be a Jew is to stand on the fault line of the faulty conception of progress, to see and to know what history will present based on what history has always done. But it is also to do what Primo Levi did in Auschwitz and find purpose and direction in one's own spirit, meaning in movement, pockets of resistance in everyday life. It is in the simplest things that life, in all its cruelty and absurdity, can make sense, if only for a few moments. I think back now to Tommy Tiko, the great Hungarian Jewish maestro and Holocaust survivor, who right at the end of his life was in Montefiore home, which, as we would all know here, is strictly kosher. And I went in to visit Tommy once. He was already paralyzed down one side of his body from a terrible stroke. Knowing what he had been like back in the day, vivid, sprightly, indomitable, it was very hard to witness. So in an effort to lighten things up a bit, I said to Tommy, what do you want me to get you something from a cafe? And he said to me, Simon, get me a fucking ham sandwich. I never forgot that moment. In a simple joke, no more than a few words, Tommy could express the entirety of Jewish history. Resistance, deprivation, devastation, irony, absurdity. Tommy's request for a ham sandwich was a joke, of course, but it was also something else. It was an act of rebellion disguised as comedy. A last assertion of freedom from within the strictures of both religion and history. In that single, irreverent line, he embodied centuries of sermons. The defiant humour of a people who refuse to be defined by what was done to them and who will continue, in spite of everything, to argue with each other and others, and to love and build the fabric of the countries that have welcomed them. Because Jewish survival has never been just about surviving. It has been about transforming survival into consciousness, turning trauma into texture. It's not that we remember because we cannot forget, it's that we choose not to let forgetting become a virtue. The difference is moral, not merely historical. Every generation of Jews has faced its own catastrophe and asked the same question, what now? After Babylon, rebuild. After Rome, reinterpret. After Spain, wander and write. After Auschwitz, bear witness. And now, after everything, in the face of new challenges, louder voices, the age of outrage theatre, we face a new kind of trial. One not of persecution, but of distortion. I will say on a personal note that these last months have not left me untouched. Since October 7, the rupture has not been only geopolitical or historical, it has reached into private lives, mine included. Friendships and relationships have fractured, certainties collapsed, conversations I once trusted have turned cold. I felt the same dislocation so many Jews have felt, the shock of seeing the moral ground shift under our feet, and of realising that what we thought was secure was only provisional. Yet even in that rupture, I've discovered something truer, that Jewish endurance is not a metaphor from history, but a living muscle, one that we are still using and one I know in my own body. We are witnessing a grotesque moral inversion, where the vocabulary of justice has been stolen and weaponized against the people who invented it, where images of suffering are used not to awaken conscience, but to extinguish it, where compassion itself has been corrupted by ideology, to declare a position rather than affirm humanity. This is the horseshoe of history. The far left and the far right, once mortal enemies, now meet in the same shadow. They share the same contempt for nuance, the same romance with purity, the same desire to erase complexity in favour of moral spectacle. What unites them is not ideology, but exhaustion, a hatred of ambiguity and a terror of self-doubt. And so the language of empathy becomes a cudgel. The rhetoric of liberation becomes a mask for cruelty. Images of human suffering are used not to awaken conscience, as I said, but to extinguish it. Empathy itself a weapon, the human face a banner. It is a new form of barbarism dressed in the language of virtue. A barbarism not of ignorance, but of moral exhaustion. People too tired to think, too shallow to discern, too performative to feel, so they must make noise, any noise, to paper over the void within. That is why Jewish artists and Jewish thinkers must continue to create. Not because art can save us, but because it can remember us. Because in the ruins of language, the poem, the symphony, the ham sandwich joke, the line of commentary, these are all that remain uncorrupted. Paul Celan, who I mentioned earlier, called his poems messages in a bottle. He threw them into the sea of language, hoping that they might reach someone, somewhere, who could still hear. That, I think, is what every Jewish artist does. Writes against the current of forgetfulness, knowing most bottles will never be found, but that the act of composition and being cast into the air or waters of culture is a conversation with the cosmos. In this sense, art is not just self-expression for me, it is self-preservation. Every Jewish creative act, whether it's a sonata on the piano, a midrash, or Jerry Seinfeld doing a stand-up routine, is a refusal to allow history to close over us like water. And so we return again to the act of creation. When I play Gershwin on the piano, that miraculous synthesis of Yiddish lament and American optimism, I'm reminded that joy itself can be a form of defiance, that to make something beautiful in the aftermath of horror is not naive, but sacred, because beauty is not the opposite of horror. It's what remains when horror has spent itself. It's the echo of the divine still vibrating in us. But in many respects, we live now at a time allergic to beauty. Beauty requires discernment, hierarchy, attention, all qualities our culture treats as elitist. It demands time, patience, humility before form. Difficulty takes time. Difficulty reminds us of our finiteness. Difficulty confounds reductive notions of identity. To be an artist now is therefore more important than ever, for it is to resist distraction itself, to insist that attention, patience, and waiting still matter in an age intoxicated by immediacy. To sit with ambiguity, to let meaning unfold slowly, is almost unfashionable and therefore all the more necessary. The modern world rewards outrage, Judaism rewards interpretation. One screams, the other studies. One asserts, the other asks. And so to live Jewishly, to think Jewishly, and this I should add, is most certainly not limited, I would say, to Jewish people, is to refuse the flattening of discourse that turns everything into sides. It is to hold complexity even when the mob demands simplicity. When I write, I try to keep this in mind, that meaning must be wrested from silence, not shouted from rooftops, that the moral seriousness of art lies not in its message but in its method. For me, music remains the purest form of that resistance. Notes don't lie. They don't perform. They either ring true or they don't. A phrase played dishonestly betrays itself instantly. There is no algorithm for sincerity. Perhaps that's why totalitarian regimes always tend to distrust art, especially art made by Jews. They sense that real art can't be coerced, can't be made to chant. It moves according to its own laws, like conscience. The philosopher Emmanuel Levinas wrote that ethics begins in the face of the other, in the recognition that the other calls me to responsibility. It's a profoundly Jewish idea that relation precedes ideology, that duty precedes choice, that we are answerable even when we do not agree. Even now, when every screen confronts us with faces pleading to be seen, that responsibility remains indivisible. Compassion is not a zero-sum game. This too, I think, is art's task, to make us answerable again, to restore the human face to what politics has turned into abstraction. And so the Jewish artist must not only remember, he must also rehumanize. He must resist the temptation to dehumanize even those who would deny him or her that same humanity. He must take what history dehumanized and restore its form, its dignity, its breath. To write is to listen to the dead without letting them silence the living. To play is to make audible the silence that follows atrocity, not to fill it, but to honor it. Our ancestors built cathedrals of commentary. We must build cathedrals of attention, in prose, in music, and in thought, because the danger now is not only forgetting the Holocaust, it is misunderstanding it. Treating it merely as metaphor, as currency, as cudgel, it deserves reverence, not repurposing. To keep memory alive is not to repeat the past endlessly, but to let it instruct us silently. To live with ghosts, but not become them. The danger of our age, I believe, is not forgetting what was done to us, but forgetting what we must not become. Again, I think of Primo Levi, who said that understanding Auschwitz is impossible, but remembering it is necessary. And I think too of those who can no longer remember, those for whom the word Jew is just another symbol to be filled with someone else's meaning. Our duty, my duty, is to empty that word of hatred and fill it again with life, with wit, with learning, with the stubborn insistence that the word, the logos, still matters. And perhaps that's where I'll end, with words. Because for all the music I play, all the notes I strike, I remain bound to language. The Jew is never far from the book, even when the book is silent. Sebastian's notebooks, Celan's poems, my grandmother's own memoirs. They all say the same thing in different ways. We lived, we saw, we bore witness. We made meaning when meaning seemed impossible. To be a Jew then is to keep writing even when the page is white with fear, to keep playing even when the notes are drowned by noise, to keep believing not in redemption but in responsibility, and to know that humour and holiness are not opposites but allies, that to laugh at despair is to wound it, and that the ham sandwich is as sacred as the psalm when it's offered in the right spirit. So yes, in some ways you could say it's indecent to speak of art when people are dying. But indecency is not always wrong. Sometimes it's the only moral act left, to insist on creation in the face of destruction. That is the secret our ancestors understood, from Jerusalem to Vilna to Melbourne. That the opposite of death is not life, but meaning. And that meaning, fragile though it is, still flickers in our songs, in our books, in our laughter. We are not the people of despair. We are the people of commentary. We are the people of and yet. We are the people of the question, of the qualification. The world has tried to silence that phrase for 3,000 years, and yet it returns today, right now. And yet we write, and yet we sing, and yet we live. That, my fellow Jews and Gentiles, is how memory survives. Not in monuments of stone, but in the living voice, trembling, cracked, but still speaking. It is not upon us to complete the work, but neither are we free to desist from it. And so we begin again. Shema Yisrael, listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I know that you'll all agree that that was just the most outstanding oration. Just outstanding, really. Thank you. And Simon, there are so many quotes that I could use from that incredible talk that you gave, but the one that resonated with me is how you remind us to keep memory alive is not to repeat the past endlessly, but to let it instruct us silently, to live with ghosts but not become them. The danger of our age is not forgetting what was done to us, but forgetting what we must not become. That was so meaningful and profound and relevant in today's challenging times. Thank you so much. And now to our musical performance. Elena Kats-Chernin, AO, is one of Australia's leading contemporary composers, celebrated for her vibrant and distinctive music. Her work has featured at many events, including the Sydney Olympic Games, the Rugby World Cup and the Commonwealth Games. Born in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, Elena has received numerous awards, among them the Helpman, the Limelight and Sydney Myer Performing Arts Awards, as well as the 2022 Award for Artistic Excellence. Her recent score for Adam Elliott's Memoir of a Snail was nominated for an Academy Award. Her piece, Eliza Aria, achieved international fame through the Lloyd's TSB campaign, and her concerto, Sarenka, which you will hear shortly, was nominated for Work of the Year at the 2024 APRA Awards. Elena's most recent album, Ancient Letters, was #1 on the ARIA charts just last week. Elena was also the highest voted Australian composer in ABC's Classic 100 in both 2024 and 2025. Her music is performed worldwide by leading orchestras and opera houses. Rachel Tobin is the Associate Principal Cellist of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. She studied at the Royal Academy of Music in London and earned her master's degree at Man's College of Music in New York. As a soloist, Rachel has performed at London's Park Lane Group New Year Series and with the London Soloist Chamber Orchestra and the Mann Symphony Orchestra. Rachel is the recipient of many prestigious awards, including the Macklin Bursary, the ABRSM International Scholarship, the Elder Scholarship, a Centenary Medal for Services to the Arts, and the Sydney Symphony Orchestra Cello Fellowship. Before joining the MSO, Rachel performed with leading ensembles including the Estonian National Opera Orchestra, Philharmonia in the UK, and the Sydney, Tasmanian and Australian Opera and Ballet Orchestras. She's also a member of the Melbourne Ensemble performing chamber music with her MSO colleagues. And Dale Baltrop, born in Brisbane, has performed across Australia and around the world. He, as a violinist, has been a member of the Australian String Quartet since 2016 and served as the concertmaster of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra for 10 years. Before that, Dale was concertmaster at the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra in Canada and principal second violin of the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra in the US. A graduate of the University of Maryland and the Cleveland Institute of Music, he began his journey in Queensland, debuting with the Queensland Symphony Orchestra at age 15. He's appeared with leading ensembles, including the Australian World Orchestra under Sir Simon Rattle, and has directed orchestras across Australia. Dale is also a passionate educator, having taught with ANAM, the Australian Youth Orchestra, and institutions in Canada and the US. Together, they will perform Sarenka, a haunting, beautiful, and evocative work that speaks to memory, loss, and resilience. Can you please remain seated during the performance? And I'd like to welcome Elena, Rachel, and Dale to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. It's a great honor to be here. I'll just say a few words about the piece itself, because you don't have programs. It's amazing for me to play with Dale and Rachel. It's the piece that they premiered with Melbourne Symphony Orchestra 2 years ago. And it's fantastic to be able to revisit this work that Bob has commissioned. And we had a lot of conversations with Bob and family about Sarah, who I sadly never met. But she was an extraordinary woman, and she had this beautiful childhood in Eastern Europe. Her father was a doctor. She had an educated upbringing, and then that childhood was taken away from her. And that's the first movement of this work. It's called Childhood, it's playful, and as requested by Bob, it uses a partisan song that Bob asked me to quote. It was because Sarah, as a 16-year-old, had to be an underground fighter in the war because she had to hide. Her family was extinguished, and it was, for such a young girl to be a partisan in that time, it's just unthinkable. When you think about 16-year-olds today, it's just beyond imagination. So that song is in the first and in the last movements. Second movement is, you'll hear some very strange sounds from violin and cello. It's about the war itself. So it's quite ugly, and it's called Danger, and it has quite threatening sounds, but it's not very long movement. So I tried not to dwell on that, because the family, Bob, we always talked about optimism and trying to look forward to something beautiful. So third movement is Hope, after a short intermission where cello and violin have a melody preparing the third movement. It's looking forward, but also it has probably the most Jewish sound in it. I would like to say that from third to fourth movement, there is no break. So it goes straight into the fourth, when Sarah came to Melbourne with her husband, started life here with the family, they had a very flourishing business of pantyhose, correct, called Genevieve. And they had parties, their life was kind of very busy, and there's a bit of sound of factory in that piece, in that movement. It's the sound of the, Bob sort of sang me some of the rhythms of the machines, because he had to work there as a child, as a young boy. So there's a little bit of czardash, tango, a bit of klezmer, which in the orchestra was clarinet. And so it's a kind of a happy, very fast movement. A lot of work out for this too. The fifth movement, exact opposite. And I really love, Simon, how you say the opposite of death is not life, but what was the word you said? Yeah, well, hope, yes, and understanding. Yeah, and the fifth movement is called Ripples. It's about knowledge. Bob's mum, Sarah, I think she spoke 12 languages? Yeah, 9. Oh, I like to exaggerate. Sorry, 12 is good. And she read a lot, and she gave advice to everyone who came along. And she was a tour guide in the art gallery. She knew a lot. And so these big ripples, for me, it's her spirit. It's a very quiet movement. It's like a waltz, very, very slow waltz, and has a little bit of childlike atmosphere in it as well. And then we come to the end. I call it, strangely, surrealistically, memory of the future. Because I feel it's for the next generation. And I start on the piano, in this case, orchestra in the other case. The partisan song comes in, and then we have a little bit of material from the first movement. And here we are. Butterplay, thank you.
Museum. Simon, you told us how music goes directly to the heart and to the soul, and our souls are singing after that unbelievable, brilliant performance. Thank you so much. Bob, you must have been exceptionally proud as well to hear this beautiful. Yeah, just fantastic. So our sincere, tonight's oration has been, the theme has been the role of music in Holocaust remembrance. Through stories, historical reflection and thoughtful conversation, we've seen how music can become a powerful form of resistance, remembrance and healing during and long after the Holocaust. So our sincere thanks to you, Simon, for your outstanding oration. To the performers, I have no words to Elena and Rachel and Dale, and you have shown us how music can give voice to memory and loss and resilience and bring stories to life. Unbelievable. Thank you so much. And maybe that is where it's a good spot to end, with words and with music, because words and music remind us of the enduring power of memory, the courage to bear witness, the responsibility we all share to ensure that remembrance continues with dignity, with meaning, with hope. So thank you again. Yeah. An event like this doesn't just happen. So thank you to Ruben Zilberspick and Suzanne, Chief Operations Officer of the MSO, for making this happen. Thank you to our incredible Melbourne Holocaust Museum staff, especially Aviva and Maya. And thank you to our tireless volunteers, everybody who worked so hard to ensure this evening was a huge success. And last but not least, thank you to you, our audience, for attending tonight's event, and good night.